The world of social audio is having a big bang moment. Can a 6-person Boston-based company find a way to differentiate its product, survive, and win? Our guest is here to say, oh, heck yes. Stay tuned, everyone, for the Startup live show. Let's glow. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Startup Live show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I now share founder startup stories to help newly minted business owners find the solutions and inspiration they need to succeed. And thank you for carving out time to tune in and up your founder game while cheering on a fellow founder. You never know, a new resource, a tool, a solution, an aha moment can be found hearing a fellow founder's startup story. If you're joining us live today, please say hello in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, please share your favorite emoji in the comment thread so I can swing by and go, hey, how you doing? And if you like the founder stories you're hearing and the gems you're gathering today or during the replay, please share with your community or on your social feed. And if you're tuning in from YouTube, please share your subscribe love and click on the bell icon for alerts. Thank you, too, for liking the video from wherever you're watching. You know, we're live on Twitch and Periscope and LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. And your like really helps us reach more first-time founders and help them maximize the joy and minimize the heartache from their startup life. Okay, so let me tell you about our guest. He's local, which I always love because I know that as soon as we're all safe to do so, we can hug in real life. And his name is I call him Zeeshan Sheikh, and he is the founder and CEO of Space. Let me just pull up this wonderful graphic so you can learn while I'm talking about him. He is the CEO of Space, an audio as a service platform that enables you to add clubhouse-style audio chat directly to your product under your brand where your customers already are. And for almost 20 years, he has been entrenched in the emerging tech world with several entrepreneurial adventures to his credit. His deep experience with leading and building globally distributed teams, process improvement, eCommerce and web architectures, and product innovation and architecture make him uniquely qualified to scale Space. I'm on the edge of my seat to hear all the details from this phenomenal founder. Let's bring him into the room. Here he is, the one and only Z.
Excited to be here, Ande.
So happy to see you today. I mean, you live right down the road from me, and I know we're going to hang out in real life soon. We're all getting vaccinated here in Massachusetts. Everybody can get vaccinated now. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into the startup community in real life. And I found you because a lot of folks in the area were starting to use you and talk about. And of course, I found you and was introduced to you on my favorite social media bar, Twitter. So I was so excited to see what you're doing, especially because I am a firm believer, and please take this in, folks. I'm a firm believer that, sure, it's been done before, but not by you and not for us. You can find another sweet spot when you're building a business. And Z, I'm excited to hear all the stories about Space and how you are doing that. Just want to say a quick hello. Goddess Mia, how are you? Mia's from Denver. She is an incredible founder. She has several hats she wears, including a hard hat because she is also a building inspector, but she is the wonderful host of the powerful Shit You Don't Talk About podcast. So, folks, if you want to hear the topics that you are craving to hear about, Mia is doing it, okay? So go follow her everywhere. And, you know, while we're live, Z and I would love to cheer you on, okay? And even if you're watching the replay, put your information into the comment thread so I can do a virtual, what? Look at you. You're amazing. All right. So Z, you have, done it all in your background. I mean, when I talk about, and this is what investors look for too. They look for that incredible product founder fit, right? They're looking at what is it this person is doing and is it a good fit for how they're raising their business? And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't have really much of a founder fit for any of my businesses, but you do. So was this, talk a little bit first about entrepreneurship, because sometimes we have role models growing up. Sometimes we have folks who influence us in our lives, or sometimes we were out making money at the age of 7. Tell us a little bit about your background in entrepreneurship and what led you to where you were ready to start your own business.
Sure. So growing up, my dad would always tell me that entrepreneurship was in our blood. So I think that theme always existed. And I think it was probably in high school. So I grew up in Dubai, and my dad used to work for a company called Allergan, and he left Allergan to basically run his own company. So he created 2 companies. One was a advertising firm called Concept and Design, and the other one was his healthcare kind of distribution company. So that's how he just jumped into entrepreneurship. For me,
and you weren't scared, like you were watching him do his thing, and you weren't like, "Oh my gosh."
Well, I think at 16 you don't really care about somebody else, right? So what you care about is what movies and going to school and whatnot.
That's good, but you saw him out there hustling and taking care of the family with his own business. So that's great. All right, so go on.
So the only thing that I would say about entrepreneurship is what I saw was the other side of it. Being in high school, you see you see your parents working endless hours, and then of course the stress from it and trying to figure out where the funding's going to come from, and maybe not having enough and burning through savings. So I watched that part, which I think was a great learning experience, because what I realized was if I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I'm going to be a different entrepreneur. I'm not going to basically burn the savings and drain out my 401k. It's going to be a bit different. So the way I've done entrepreneurship has been a bit safer, but again, it's been on my timeline.
Right. And the beauty of that too, having been exposed to the nail biting moments, watching all of that happen, was that it set the tone for you. And what I understand from watching so much and reading so much is that when you do take your time and you make sure that you have a lot of the parts and pieces in either ahead of time, or you do it as a side hustle while you're proving it, gives you more time, more flexibility. And folks, I'll be the first to say, don't listen to those myths that say burn the ships, burn the bridges. Yeah. No, that is a lot of stress. Unless you're 26, you've got a trust fund and you're not, you don't have to worry about feeding the kids and making sure that everybody's got a roof over their head. That's wonderful. So how did you end up in innovative and emerging tech? What about that called to you and said, this is where my lane is going to be as a professional?
So I think at some point I just realized that I wasn't the perfect developer. I just didn't have the patience for it. And I think what I was really good at was just figuring something out. So I became the person that people went to when the path was, all right, we either can not do it or it's just impossible.
Yeah.
That's where people would call me in and basically have me pick something up and figure out how to get it done. And I figured out I was very good at that. Mixture of ADHD and mixture of just conquering the impossible was probably most of it. And I think that's how I ended up in realizing that my skill set isn't in trying to be the best developer. And then I also at some point paired that on top of like going out and becoming a leader. So I got into leadership in 2010. My first startup was actually a side hustle. It's a Boston company called Blank Label. It's custom soothing for men, made to measure suits. So they're still out here in Downtown Crossing. And that was my first startup. Again, as a side hustle, not much risk because still had a day job. And I did have a day job for about the next 10, 11 years. Mm-hmm. So Space is my first full-time gig.
Wow, this is tremendous news. And that is Black Label still around?
Blank, BLANK.
Blank, I mean, yeah.
Blank. Yes, they are. So they survived we lost a lot of our stores.
Sure.
We used to be in 6-7 different areas. We were in DC, we were in Chicago, Atlanta. I think Atlanta's still there, but we did shut down a whole bunch. So now we're in Boston and Atlanta, and I think we just opened up New York, or are opening up New York. So yes, we're still around.
Oh my gosh, congratulations on that. I'm going to have to check it out. I know I've seen it. I know my brain is saying I've seen the logo. I've seen it somewhere, but so you were working at a local company, Everbridge, right?
Yes, I joined Everbridge in 2015 to run innovation. So I think to answer your question, which I was trying to get to before, but my ADHD kicked in. So I did leadership for about 5 years at a company called Quadramed. And then I realized that I wanted to just go out and mix what I learned about innovation from my startup and apply that to an enterprise setting. So Everbridge was looking for somebody who could basically run 20 or so experiments a year, be happy with most of them failing, and then just getting up and trying again. And that's literally what Everbridge offered me as an opportunity to just come on, fail as many times as I wanted, as long as I was willing to get up again, but also not have to worry about funding because it's corporate. So funding is
and it
there.
has had nice assets for you there. Yes. And what I love about that too is that you were an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Right. And so
with a side hustle, with several side
hustles. But what I want you to take away from what we were just talking about, what Z was just sharing, you've heard it a lot in the Startup Life Live show. People turned to me and said, oh, you can solve that problem, do it. This is a common ingredient in a successful founder. They love to solve problems. So I love that about you, Z, and I hope you're telling a lot of your investors that that's who you are intrinsically, because that will give them even more faith in investing in you and helping you with Space. So what called you to launch Space? I mean, and when did you do it? Because we all know the Clubhouse story. Let's hear your story.
Sure. So I think Space is, the slow motion when you're falling down and you're not completely falling down in one go. So I think that's what Space was. So in 2018, there was a product idea which was from our own need. So I ran several teams at Quadramed, and then of course at Everbridge we had different things that were going on. And the biggest issue that I had, this is a leadership perspective, was single silos. So we had engineering as a silo, we had product development as a silo, and sales, our customer service. And people would always complain about the other team. Oh, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know what's important. And what I used to run at Quadramed were these open door meetings, which is you could walk into my meeting and just hang out and listen. It doesn't matter which team you were in. So the idea was like, how do you take these discussions that are happening in GoToMeeting or in like closed doors? Because there really wasn't something that was private in an engineering meeting that somebody in sales couldn't listen to. And what we realized was that if sales could listen to those meetings, or if developers could listen to the customer service calls that were coming in, there'd be a lot of empathy that would be built. Plus, you'd also ramp people much faster and help them learn about the other team. So the idea was in 2018, let's build a product that basically, we call it Jump On. Build a product where anyone can just jump on into any meeting as long as it's not a private meeting. And they didn't need GoToMeeting links or any of that stuff. So that was the idea in 2018. We tried to build it. We applied to Y Combinator, got to Y Combinator's interview day, and then we didn't make the cut because they didn't believe that anybody could really come in and compete with GoToMeeting. Of course, they hadn't met Zoom yet or COVID, but that was that in 2018. So in 2020, we're catching up now.
Yeah.
One of my friends, his name is Luke. He's the founder for Friday.app. It's a pretty cool product. I was using it for my teams because Everbridge was, of course, like everybody else, shut down, working from home. And we had just acquired a company in the UK, and I needed a way to have quick check-ins and automated stand-ups. So Friday app does that workflow automation. So I was talking to him and I said, hey, why don't you just take this code that I wrote 2 years ago? You're a funded startup. Why don't you do something with it? Because I hate this code just sitting there. And his answer was like, well, we're stuck at home. Everyone's stuck at home. Why don't you just take your enterprise code that you wrote and make it consumery? And a week later, Clubhouse showed up and we kept building. And I think one of the reasons why I kept building was because what I saw with Clubhouse was it was pure FOMO, exclusive network. And I wanted to maybe have a different way of a product and basically give people who didn't care for the FOMO, didn't care for like that massive discovery, that just wanted a platform that they could go live with their own community or small group, just go live. And I wanted to give them that option. Turns out people do love FOMO. So we didn't really get that audience, but we did pivot from there to more of an enterprise play because that's really what we started with in the beginning.
Right. And folks, Clubhouse, so many people are very happy with the platform. One of the main reasons I found Z and Space was because I'm an Android user. So when Clubhouse was doing very early beta last summer and I was getting invited left or right, I couldn't join. And so it wasn't FOMO for me. It was feeling left out for me. And it did not leave a good taste in my mouth, especially since we know that worldwide, 80% of smartphone users are Android users. However, in the US, it's reversed. We have more iPhone users in the US. And to this day, I don't even know if they do Android. So that's one of the other reasons that I was searching for another voice app that I could join so I could do some fun conversations on the audio level. But then you had a really, as we say here in Boston, wicked smart pivot. And let's talk a little bit about that because, everybody knows that I'm all about how important it is for us to prove your value prop. Okay. So at this point in time, you're at the point where you're saying, okay, I get it. FOMO is and the secret handshake, and then I call it the nightclub marketing strategy with Clubhouse, which is a lot of people are behind the red velvet rope, but the VIPs can come in. You decided, okay, there's another sweet spot for us. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So the sweet spot actually came from Luke, who's the founder of Friday. So last year when we were using our own product, what we were doing was we'd host these sessions every Tuesday. We'd ask our users what they thought of the product. We were releasing features almost every few days, almost every week. And we would very quickly just have users come back, again, because Clubhouse was still very closed back then. So we had the luxury of users coming back into our product, asking us what we thought about what we were building. And then, of course, they would give us feature requests. So he saw that, and his one question was like, this is amazing, but how do I get this on my website? I don't want to take my users where they already are to another product. I don't want to take them on a Zoom. I can't even ask my customers to go on a Zoom. They're on my website. I just introduced a new feature. How do I ask them if they like this feature? He's like, can you give me some integration, some widget that I can just launch on my website? So this was last year. And finally, I think I want to say December or maybe early this year, I said, all right, we'll build it for you. And as we started building it, we just saw, I'd say, whole bunch of the platforms, LinkedIn, Reddit, Slack, who isn't building audio into their product? Figma just launched audio into their product. So,
and Facebook, which is why the title of the show was Can Space and Z as the leader help this platform, his app, compete against these bigger entities. I mean, Facebook, they'll be out in June, maybe sooner, maybe May, with their audio. But here you go. You found the problem. I don't want my customers to leave my website. Can I just say, everybody, right now, that gives me what I call, hold on, wait for it. It's that white space, that blank area where a company can slip right in and make something happen and add tremendous value. And especially on the B2B side, because most of the audio apps, right, are B2C, right?
B2C.
And you're focused on B2B.
Pure B2B, pure B2B. And I think the other thing is, when people are already on your website, the website is one angle, but some people also have, they don't have websites, they have apps. So we're also releasing further along this year, instead of the widget for our websites, we'll also have SDKs for apps, so that when you send people links, you're inviting them to your app itself, and you can launch these kind of audio frictionless conversations within any kind of product that you have. So that's really what I think we're looking at adding.
Oh my gosh, audio frictionless. Can you give me an example of what that would look like? Like, what's a typical app example so I can go there in my head?
Sure. So I think I'll use Figma because they actually added their audio into the product, but of course not everybody has a budget like Figma. So right now, what most developers, what they were doing was they were looking at these shared documents, because when you're on a Figma document, your cursors show up, and the action was putting comments in. So if you wanted to make a comment to somebody, you were doing that. When we internally used Figma last year, we would actually open up a space session. So we would have audio in a space session, and we would, with developers, go through Figma to talk about what's happening, because they could follow your cursor to see what's happening. So that's literally what Figma did. They just basically said, go live, and you can start talking right away with anyone else who's viewing your same board. So when we say frictionless, it's literally not having to install a plugin, not having to go download something else, not having to find your 5-digit meeting link plus your password and whatnot, or opening up Zoom.
It's huge, folks. It's absolutely huge. So, for example, if I wanted to hop on to andelyons.com, that's my website. And if you haven't seen my new updated website, which is all about the Startup Life Live show, hop on over there, everyone. I could say, hey, I've got an Ask Me Anything going on today. Come on over, and they would go to my website, and that would happen there.
Yes, and they would just click and they'd give microphone permission, and there you go. And the quality is just like Zoom. It's high fidelity.
Yeah. So this is really, really good. I'm going to make sure, Andy Jack, do you know Andy Jack?
I do not.
Okay. So he and I co-host a monthly pitch event. So I talked to him on Saturday. I'm going to be mentioning this to him because he and his partner create amazing apps for companies. And I bet he'll be all over what you are doing and how you have differentiated. So let's just go right back to that point, though, when you saw, because folks, this happens all the time to founders. They're busy. They come up with this great idea. They're creating it. They're building it. They're building the team. And all of a sudden, what? Clubhouse? What? Twitter Spaces? What? LinkedIn? These are the big players. It can just make you go, I'm going to take my baseball glove and go home,
There were ups and downs last year.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit. And I wouldn't call them mood swings, but they were, maybe the good example is imposter syndrome. I think that's really what it was.
Yeah.
That sets on very fast, especially when all your friends on Twitter, and I'll call them all friends, like my 1,100 followers, not many. They're sending you DMs with like, oh, did you see what's happening with Clubhouse? Did you see what's happening here? Oh, they're doing this now. I think at some point you have to decide if you want to play their game or if you want to play your own game. And I think that's like the biggest part that you need to realize is whose game am I playing? Because if you play their game on your terms, you'll most likely lose. But if you play your own game, there's a much easier upside because you know what you're building. And as long as you don't go find that shiny ball, you'll head somewhere. It could end up in failure, but you have to be okay with that.
Absolutely. Can we just say that was brilliant advice? Hold on. That's where the audience would be going. Yes. I just love that. Something fierce. And okay, so we're going to bring up Barbara here. Interesting. B2B and from your website to run, audio events. Just like you see on Clubhouse, only you don't have to go hop on Clubhouse. Mm-hmm. And they don't get all the credit and they don't get all your information. And how about the product itself? Because one of the things I was seeing, Brian Fanzo today on Twitter was putting a list of what you need to have if you're going to have a good social audio app. But that was for, the type where it's B2C, mm-hmm. But still what are some of the features that people can do? Can you record the conversation? Can there be chat amongst each other? How does that work?
So soon that we will have recording. That's probably going to be added next week. Okay. Part of our go live because we're actually releasing our product to everybody on the 1st of May. So we'll have recording, but the most interesting feature that people like is that when you're running these audio sessions, you can drop a live link into that room. So if you're having a discussion and you want to have a call to action, you can just enable a link and then people can follow that. So if you were running a product discussion talking about a new feature you just released, and one of your audience basically asks you like, hey, can you give me the documentation for it? You can drop that link in there and then they can open that up so they can follow along. Mm-hmm. And then things like adding a screen share is also going to be an option we're adding. Chat, we're probably going to stay away from chat because that messes up the audio experience, but also most people, when they chat, it ends up with stuff that doesn't add value. Where we see the chat can add value is the host-based questions, just like how you're getting them right now. Yeah. The comments that are coming into you, that really adds value, but like chat amongst peers doesn't give you the same because it's not a social app. Again, it's going to be something focused on things like that.
Yeah. I put the URL for the joinspace.webflow, right?
That's actually live now. So we made that go live. So that's live.
That's live now. And so
joinspace.co itself is live.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to have all those links in the show notes, folks. And for you who listen to this on the podcast, you can find it in your show notes there as well. That is wonderful. Can you go in a little deeper though, why the chat feature is I'm thinking it's distracting.
It's distracting because it takes away from the conversation. If you're trying to have a top run conversation with the host, the audience can have chat, but that's where it gets confusing because if somebody does have a valid question, how do you bring that up and how do you make sure it doesn't get lost in the other stuff like, hey, people saying things like, this is amazing, this is fun, or they start talking about how the day is going or COVID shots or politics.
Yeah, because I hadn't thought about that. That's wonderful. And, I know I say this a lot, viewers and listeners, the beauty of understanding the competition out there and understanding your sweet spot. And Z gave us the best information. That'll be definitely my snippet that I'll be sharing all over the place after the show. Just walk down the bread aisle. You're seeing different, you're seeing constantly new brands, new types of bread, and there's a bajillion of them. And so they're making money with their loaves. You can do the same thing by differentiating and finding the right vibe with your business entities. So what is your go-to-market strategy at this point? What are you focusing on? Where will you be looking, if you can talk about that?
Sure. So our focus is going to be on people who are founders, mostly startups like ourselves, who are not in Series A yet, or maybe have just entered Series A, who value customer relationships and value customer feedback. So for them, they're getting features out every week. What they want to know is what is the impact of those features and if they can improve them, because that's really how they get more revenue. And that's, I think, what we want to power for our first set of tier customers.
And how about e-commerce?
E-commerce is our next one. So going into e-commerce is going to be the next one, because there are many. So this is also maybe a personal feeling, which is if I'm on a website and I'm trying to figure out a product, I really don't want to talk to a chatbot. If I see somebody's live, I also don't want to get on a click to call. Right. But if someone's on there running product sessions about what they're doing, I'd most likely listen to see how I could use their product. Right. And I think it makes sense for like higher ticket items. Like I think if I'm buying a mattress and I had a question and there's other people asking questions, or someone's launching a new product, that's really works very well. But I think for us, recreating the whole doorbuster experience, limited live drops, I think that's something that we are interested in for e-commerce.
Yeah, and I think too, for example, one of my mentees is Peach Box Co. And they do gift boxes for corporate. So, you're closing a deal on real estate, or you onboarding new clients as an attorney or an accountant, et cetera. These gift boxes are amazing. But I would think that, they would have an opportunity to talk about why did they compile these particular products into this here, and maybe talking about the different products. I just love this Something Fierce. So you mentioned early on that what you learned from watching your parents as entrepreneurs was that you were not going to get rid of the 401k plan, delete the kids' college savings and things like that for starting a business. But now here you are. It's no longer a side hustle. You're in it full time. How are you funding?
So I think last year when I was building this just for fun, that was coming out from personal funds. And then again, this is probably maybe the third time I'm mentioning him. Luke actually responded to an investor on Twitter. That's where I usually hang out, being an introvert. Yeah. That's my hangout spot. Jason Calacanis was out there looking for a clubhouse or party line competitor. And that's not what we were building, but Luke suggested he check us out, and he did. And he sent me a DM, and I said, well, thanks, but that's not what we're building. We're building, more of an enterprise product, and he wanted to invest. So we took his money, joined his accelerator, and then from there started a pre-seed round, because we were getting enough interest from enterprise VC, who saw that vision of what we wanted to build made sense. So we basically did a pre-seed round, and that's how we're funding this.
And folks, I got to tell you, to have Jason on the investor team, that's a real coup for you. See,
he's an amazing personality and a person, but he is very different on Twitter and very different. I think that's the number one question that people ask me. I get every now and then I'll get questions like, some people will be like, can you give me some feedback about Jason? I'm thinking of joining his accelerator. Is he really the same on Twitter? I said, nope, different person.
Wow. That's what my good friend Mona DeFabri was saying. She's the founder of Radivision. And you may want to talk to her, by the way. But she was saying the same thing. So isn't that great to hear, though? Because again, we have our online personas, folks. Yep. And we have to remember that the person that you're seeing often online may be that way for a reason. And so that's really cool to know. And so at a certain point, you'll be able to go for a Series A. And that leads me to pricing. Where are you at and how you're going to charge? Because gosh, this is always one of the hardest challenges that founders have is figuring out, okay, where am I going to fit in for pricing? Yeah, and you've got to go through that whole model part. How have you figured that out?
So I think one thing that's important to call out is that pricing is a problem for East Coast founders. It's not a problem for West Coast founders.
All right, share why.
So on what I've seen happen is on the East Coast, because a lot of the companies that get any kind of investment are usually post traction, post revenue. There's like a very strong focus on getting revenue through the door. On West Coast, you can actually get your napkin IDs funded. So when you have a napkin ID that's funded, you have a lot of VC funding your user acquisition, your customer acquisition cost. So I believe that the West Coast view of things is build it and then you'll figure out pricing. So just build it, get the distribution, and you'll get there. Whereas the East Coast is more like, no, how do we validate this? And I think being cautious is fine. But at the same time, if you're overly cautious, you don't get to that growth phase of trying to get most distribution, because for some of these things, it is first to market, first to distribution, first to a whole bunch of stuff. And if you don't get there, you don't win.
That's right. But you're not first.
On the widget side for audio, we might be.
Okay.
Now the question is, can we scale it fast enough? Can we get our product on enough websites and build a workflow with enough users where we have mass distribution and start an organic network effects kind of referral loop, which is you see our widget running on your site and you say, wow, this is cool. I'm going to go install it. At some point, someone's going to say, well, this is cool, but I don't want your logo on there. I want my logo. Like, how do I do that? So that's where we say, sure, we'll charge you for that. And then somebody might say, well, I want to run multiple rooms. Okay, well, we'll charge you for that. Well, I want recording. Okay, we'll charge you for that too. So if you want to have audio rooms on your website where the recordings stay so that consumers can come back later and listen to them. So you want to have a podcast type thingy on your website and you want it transcribed, we'll charge you for all that stuff.
That is brilliant. That's called upselling, folks.
Yep. The product's free and we will upsell the crap out of it.
Right. Beautiful. That's how it should be. I'm just going to bring this back up again so you can check this out and see hello@joinspace.co to get more details, and visit, of course, the website joinspace.co and learn more there. And the beauty of the B2B is that you're going to work with companies that actually have a budget, which is also a beautiful thing. And how are you on acquiring customers at this point? As far as I know, you said that you're looking for the startups that are not quite, or maybe just at the Series A, and they're enterprise type businesses, right? And so your team, how do they go about that? Do you have someone in marketing? How are you doing this?
Not yet. So we have about 165 on the waiting list. When we release on May 1st, they'll get access to the product first. Again, our logo's there, so we'll create a small mini referral loop. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I think that's where we'll probably go back and get ready for seed funding, because I think it's very important to know that your product isn't just something that people find interesting, it's something that people will be willing to pay for. So we do have to get to a higher certainty of product market fit. I think we're probably at the tail end. Maybe we have product market fit by the tail. Hopefully it's tail and not just something else. But I think if there is something there, we'll figure out pretty quickly how much we can get out of it. And then, of course, get a proper sales and marketing engine out on it. And then also, that's where the go-to-market pricing strategy needs to be very clear of how you will upsell and what will upsell.
Yep. This is so exciting. This is why, viewers and listeners, I love to get someone on at this early stage, because Z has gone through a lot over the last year to prove his value prop, to bring on investors, team, et cetera. It's one thing to go look back on 2020 vision, right? When someone has launched, branded, built, and exited, or, IPO'd or whatever. It's another thing to chat with a founder like Z, who has this incredible ability to problem solve and to lead and bring folks on board and have them buy into his vision. And he's already cut his teeth doing this several times for organizations and now for his own. It's amazing to be right here while you're launching and witnessing this growth happening, Z. So hooray, hooray. Was it hard to bring on talent? What advice do you have for other founders for talent acquisition, especially when maybe paying market rate isn't going to happen, or you got to do longer hours? How is that working?
So I think part of the struggle with talent acquisition is that at this stage, you don't really know what you have, right? You have a bowl of pasta. Maybe it's not even a bowl, maybe it's still in the pot cooking, and you don't know if it's done yet. So you're picking up random strands of spaghetti, throwing it on the wall to see what sticks. And now you have to take that vision and sell that to developers, to other people that might be interested in working with you. So for us, that's been part of the puzzle, is like, how do you sell a vision that you yourself don't know where it's headed to? But then how do you find people who will work with you? So there are days where, and I think this goes back to like the entrepreneurial journey. There are days where it's a 16-hour day, or where the week doesn't end or there's no weekends. But because you're doing everything, you're doing, I mean, I'm a ex-developer, so there's days where I'll code, there's customer discovery, there's investor meetings, there's marketing material you're setting up. So you have to be able to roll up your sleeves and do that. And for us, I think there's a lot of luck in what we're doing and how we got where we are. So, I mean, the Jason Calacanis thing was a lot of luck. Developers that are working with me right now, I've known them for 11 years or 5 years. You know, there's a mixture of stuff here and there, and they're not in the US. So our cost is actually much lower. And because I've worked with them for so long, I can send them my entire product spec on a Telegram message and then exactly what they should build. Wow. So I will send it to them at 1 a.m. and when I wake up at 5 or 6, it's done. So you don't get lucky like that all the time.
No, you don't. That's so wonderful. What advice do you have for first-time founders who are trying to, you know, especially the tech founders who are trying to create a minimum viable product, right? And you hear the horror stories. You obviously have a background in development and you had some people that you'd worked with in the past. But because of this great experience that you have, do you have some advice for those who are trying to do it on the skinny, you know, be budget conscious, but still create something that they can use to prove their value proposition?
So I think the first advice is that don't use an agency. If you go offshore, don't use an agency because the agency has padded cost for project management fees, and you have middlemen in front of middlemen, and that usually doesn't help. Right. So if you're trying to build a relationship with the developer, that's really what you should be doing, and using an agency doesn't help that. The second one on top of that is ship fast. If you can't ship something within a week or two, then it's just too big. You got to skin it, got to figure out how to ship it sooner. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work for enough people who value it, because you're not trying to go and sell this to Salesforce. You're trying to sell it to somebody who sees value in your product, and you're trying to get validation. If you can do it for one person, you try to get it to do it for 5. If you can do it for 5, you can do it for 10. If you can do it for 10, you can do it for 100. So I think that's really what you have to get to, and not just sit on a product dev queue for months having discussions. And it really is about iterating fast and releasing. You don't get, 80 hours to do a design. You get 8, right? And if you can't figure out what the design needs to look like in an hour, then I think you've kind of overshot it, because if you don't move fast and execute, somebody else will.
That's right. And we have to be very careful about that in tech. So this is, again, your first, you've got your side hustle scenes, but this is your first time as a founder. And you talked a little bit about the imposter syndrome that you started to face as you went full time into space, and all of a sudden people start cropping up, heavily funded companies, yep. Especially like Clubhouse, who, by the way, folks, they raised millions in May of 2020, many more millions in the summer of 2020. And this February, they raised around at $1 billion valuation, and they haven't earned a dime. And as Z said, that's West Coast for you. How has this founder journey been for you as you have found those moments where you're feeling imposter syndrome? And nobody gets away with not feeling that, folks. Nobody. I don't care how many businesses you have. Founder doubt is real. How do you shift your mindset? What do you do, and what advice do you have for other founders?
So that one's a bit harder to answer. There is obviously always going to be imposter syndrome. And I think for a lot of people, they take it harder because it's how your personality is defined. So I think for me personally, knowing what I'm building and how I'm going to get there, and of course, learning from the misses. So for example, there's a startup that got acquired called Locker Room. I'm sure you've heard of that mm-hmm. one. So Locker Room was competing with Clubhouse, except they were very focused with fan-based discussions, so all about sports. So a very great product and a very focused vertical. They got acquired for millions by Shopify. So you see a company that was formed and within 5 months they got acquired. That doesn't happen to everybody. That happens to maybe 1 in 100,000 companies, maybe even smaller than that. Maybe it was pure luck, maybe it wasn't, but they had a great product that worked. When you see something like that happen, you start easily questioning, well, how come that didn't happen to me? And I think you ignore the positives of the stuff that you are doing and start looking at the negatives. And the quicker you can break out of that trance, the easier it is to go back to focus and just go back at it and start delivering. I think for a lot of people, imposter syndrome comes in For us, I remember I was talking to a founder who was building an app, and he's in France. And he was like, he just reached out. He said, he asked if I was open to having a discussion. I said, sure. And he was like, how come you're doing such a great job? I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, no, you're like out there. You're well respected. Space is known. I was like, no one knows about space. He's like, no, it's people know about space. So I think when you hear that stuff from other people, it can be a great uplift to break up the imposter syndrome. I mean, there are cases where you might have a product that no one knows about it. And yes, that might be very true. So really what you should be doing there is trying to figure out how do you build an audience and community around what you're doing, because that'll help break out that imposter syndrome. If you have no community, it's going to be much harder.
Yep. Oh my gosh, that's such great advice. And I love that you got that feedback. What? Nobody knows about me. Oh no, you've got, you're visible.
All the way from France.
Yeah, all the way from France. That feels so good. And I highly recommend, I do this on Pinterest where I keep testimonials, just even if it's a line from someone who watched the show and benefited from it. I do a screenshot, capture it, put it on the Pinterest board, because that reminds you, oh yeah, I'm not invisible. Things are happening. It's just such great advice. So you have a family and you have started entrepreneurship, and you were raised with entrepreneurship in the home as well. But how is it now serving you, especially now that you're full-time, and you're a dad and you're a hands-on dad and making all of this happen? How have you found the journey serving you both personally and professionally?
So I think the hardest thing for me at the end of last year was wanting to work on space because I'm having so much fun, and then still work at Everbridge, which, I mean, I loved working at Everbridge. It was a lot of fun. I got to do whatever I wanted. And my ex-boss, we used to joke that I had the best job. I had no bosses, no one to question what I was doing, a budget that was up to me how I wanted to spend it, and build whatever I wanted, and fail and not get in trouble. Everybody else didn't have that same luck, which is they couldn't.
Of course, so we're all wondering, and you left, why?
Exactly. So the job security was there. But I think so last year I turned 40. And then, being in my basement for several months, I started questioning, like, all right, do I want to, in 5 years, have the same discussion with myself that I regret not doing something? And maybe it was an early midlife crisis, but I figured if I was going to do a startup full time, why not do it now in the middle of COVID, where things can't really get any worse? So figured that was the best timing on this and taking the risk for do it. Again, I had the luxury of working 20 years in enterprise, playing it safe-ish, having decent jobs that paid well, and saving enough to make that jump. And of course, having Jason, with investment and then the pre-seed round of that kind of really helped. So even though I'm not paying the wonderful, enterprise salary,
right,
I'm paying enough to cover mortgage, which is good enough. But then there's also savings.
Yes.
And I'm having fun, right?
So and you're having fun, and it's
lots of fun.
Yep, fulfillment. It's meaningful, and why not now? Right? Especially when you're having such a good time. Hey, Richard. Oh, okay. So let me just pull up Richard's comment here. Richard is a podcast host, has phenomenal. He produces podcasts for folks, and he is clearly, you see the mic right there. He's the talk to me guy is his whole brand. And I agree, Richard. I really like this idea of a more site-focused clubhouse-like audio tool. I get all my great audio advice from Richard O, folks. He'll be the first to tell me, that mic isn't working for you. So thank you for that great comment, Richard O. I'm just going to bring up your wonderful brand banner again to remind everybody to go to joinspace.co, check it out. And I'm going to read this for my podcast viewers, which is, host clubhouse style live audio chat on your website, run live podcasts, town halls, AMAs with your users to increase engagement and get feedback over audio chat without taking them to a different platform using our easy to install audio chat widget. Your users want to hear from you. Okay, everybody taking that home with you? How may we serve you? See, how may we help you with space and get the word out and add some wind to your sail?
I think the biggest help would be to get users. So if you see a value for the product, just send me an email. I will set you up with our product, and you'll be able to install the widget on your website where you can go live with your users.
Great. And folks, it's free until he upsells the heck out of you.
Yep. We're actually probably going to do an early user pricing package for the whole of 2021.
Great. See, that's, again, as I like to say from Boston, wicked smart. marketing. Seriously, that's wonderful. Any last words for founders who are tuning in that you feel compelled to share with them?
Not specifically specific words, but I think what I would suggest to people is if you're thinking of taking the plunge and joining the the entrepreneur story, or playing it as an entrepreneur, I think you have to know why you want to do it. And second, make sure that you have the financial cushion to take a loss. And you don't really lose. I think what you do is it's a learning opportunity.
Right.
I think with winning, it's an end state. With losing, it's just, all right, let me try it again.
There you go. Winning is an end state. Losing just means, oh, I'm going to try something else again, or I'll just do this differently. I love that. Something fierce. I'm so thrilled you came on to share your story with us. And I can't wait to share this out in the world. And I am a huge fan, as you know, and I'm so excited for everything that you've got going on. Congratulations.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me. Okay, so folks, did we not learn a lot from Z? And also how to still keep going, even when everybody is jumping into your space and making you feel like, now what do I do? Now what do I do? This, he spent maybe a second and then said, nope, I've got my lane. I know where I'm going and I know how to get there. And I'm going to just stay focused right there. So I just think that's phenomenal advice for so much. And Richard is doing his applause emojis because he really agrees with that too. So I'm so grateful you tuned in. Let me tell you who's coming up next week. Let me throw this up for those who are viewing. We have a phenomenal guest coming on Tuesday, the one and only Madison Campbell, founder and CEO from Leda Health. And I got to tell you, this is Tuesday, April 27th at 1 p.m. EST, 10 a.m. PST. This is a company created in 2019 for survivors by survivors to quell the many systemic shortcomings surrounding sexual assault services, because over 75% of sexual assault victims are not comfortable using the hospital process or going to law enforcement when they've been assaulted and traumatized. So clearly the existing service options for sexual assault survivors are not working. So please join me to meet Madison and learn how Leda Health is developing a new holistic system for sexual assault prevention, care, and justice. That's going to be a really good conversation. And to you founders who are out there every day, side hustling, full-time founders, you've got to remember, okay, one of my favorite Winnie the Pooh quotes right here is that you need to remember and hold this as a mantra that you are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And that's the truth, folks. You are a problem solver. You will find the solutions. Leverage folks around you to help you make things happen for your business. And take Z's advice and just keep going. All right. And you never lose, right? Okay. So I will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wishing you a delicious day. Mwah! From Boston. Cheers, everyone.